Contrary to popular wrestling, I'm Carmine the Spirito, along with my co-host, James Southard. Today, everything prior to this has just been a rehearsal. We have a topic today that I am so passionate about. The title of this episode is The Fabulous Truth About Moolah.
And Carmine, you were very, very close with Moolah. You brought her to Milwaukee several times. You used to go to the women's wrestling conventions in Las Vegas. She really meant a lot to you, didn't she?
She meant a great deal to me. I met her in 1989. I was fortunate enough to manage her a bunch of times on indie shows. Her and May gave me an award in Las Vegas at the LIWA convention. I supported LIWA and Moolah. I love Moolah. She was a Southern belle. She really was. I mean, she was shrewd, and yeah, you know, she had some witch-like qualities, I guess. I mean, she would admit that, especially her laugh was kind of witch-like. You're kind of reminded of the Wizard of Oz. But Lillian was just a wonderful person with a great sense of humor. I had so many great memories of being with her, so many laughs, and I will love her until the day I die, and I will defend her name. And honestly, I wanted to do this podcast most of all because I believe that she would expect me to do this and expect me to come to her defense. This is going to be a great show.
It really is. We've got a great bunch of guests that knew Moolah, worked around Moolah, spent a lot of time with her. We're going to kick things off with the man who started the Fight for Moolah campaign, Nigel Sherrod. He's been a huge supporter of Moolah over the past few years, speaking to lots of girls that worked around Moolah and getting their stories about the truth around Moolah. We'll also be joined by both Peggy Lee Leather and Bambi. You want to talk about two of the greatest lady wrestlers of the past 30 years, and one of the greatest feuds. Their matches were incredible every time they got in the ring with each other. They'll both be joining us to talk about knowing Moolah, working with the girls. And finally, we have Diamond Lil joining us to talk about being the adopted daughter of the Fabulous Moolah. She's going to come on and talk about her ma. It's a heartwarming story, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. It's going to be a great show, Carmine, and I cannot wait to get things underway. And let's kick things off with our first guest, Nigel Sherrod. Welcome to the podcast, Nigel. Some people know you from Deep South Wrestling. Well, here's an obscure reference for you. Some people know you from Lucha Libre USA. But we have you on to talk about you starting the Fight for Moolah campaign. Welcome to the show.
James, Carmine, thanks so much for having me on, and let's get right into it.
First, of course, the Fabulous Moolah Memorial Battle Royal, which was pulled from WrestleMania a couple years ago. Snickers, I believe, was the main sponsor there that pulled out of it because of the accusations made against Moolah.
Yeah, that's correct. And I couldn't believe, I remember seeing like when the petition came out, it was on Change, you know, you can do one of those petitions, and I didn't think anything of it. And overnight, there was over 10,000 signatures on this petition. And so the internet fans got in touch with Snickers. They were attached to this petition along with WWE, and they were able to get the name change and her name completely taken off of the thing. And I don't know, Carmine, but to me, I felt like I understood the logic of WWE saying, hey, we've got to please our sponsor, and there's 10,000 signatures here. But at the end of the day, I felt like they could have put up a little bit more of a fight than they did for her.
Well, definitely. The McMahons were very, very special to Lillian. She considered Vince Sr., Vince Jr., you know, like family. Vince Jr. like a son to her. And boy, she would just be heartbroken to hear this, that they didn't stand by her. I really feel that. To me, it's very sad.
Well, and Carmine, I'll say this too. I didn't really do a good job. I guess I could have finished my statement a little better, but that's the reason kind of why we started the Fight for Moolah campaign, is because I was disappointed in general with the WWE, but also folks in the wrestling community that had a voice, that could have used the voice and chose not to use their voice for political reasons or whatever it is. I realize that we live in an age of cancel culture and things like that, but I just felt that not enough people from the wrestling world really stood up that had a voice. and that knew her. So we started the campaign, and we talked to these women, but we also got to talk to people like Jerry Lawler, who told us his memories and how things were back in the day. We wound up interviewing over 30 women with this Fight for Moolah campaign, and we just tried to show the world, even after the WWE stopped responding to calls and Snickers didn't do anything, still wanted to put it out there, the kind of person that Lillian Moolah, whatever you want to call her, that she was. Nobody's an angel. Nobody's an
I
angel.
will defend Moolah till my dying day. To accuse her of being a pimp would be to accuse her of being a criminal. And I find that very, very offensive. That is just absurd. The main story that created all this controversy was the events with Sweet Georgia Brown.
That's right. And, of course, Sweet Georgia Brown was South Carolina's first ever African-American female pro wrestler that Moolah trained along with her husband at the time, Buddy Lee. So Sweet Georgia Brown, there were accusations from some members of her family, I believe her daughter, really only, that things weren't right, that she had been beaten up, stuffed in the trunk, all this kind of deal, which, Carmine, you know as well as I do, South Carolina in the South back in the day, they had to do this with Bobo Brazil as well.
Yes.
It was a horrible thing, but let's just take a moment to take ourselves out of 2020 and put ourselves back in that time period and understand that that was kind of how things were done to protect the African-American wrestlers in between towns.
It was not unusual at all.
That's right. But her daughter said that she saw some things, and Sweet Georgia Brown was pregnant several times. She talked about that and kind of blamed that on Moolah and the whole situation. But in talking with her son, Michael, he with us on the Fight for Moolah campaign. But you brought up a good point before we got on the air, Carmine, about who really stirred the pot on these charges.
In 2000, I heard about these accusations. They came from Penny Banner, who you could possibly say would be Moolah's number one archenemy, wouldn't you?
Yes, absolutely.
Penny Banner is the one that started this rumor mill going about Sweet Georgia Brown and things like that. And Moolah was very, very well aware of it. I remember talking to her about it in 2000 in her hotel room with Mae Young. I brought it up. Mae Young said, "Penny is just a whore." And Moolah replied, "Oh, darling, she's too stupid to be a whore. She just gives it away for free." And how that came up was, in the course of our conversation about Penny, I said, didn't Penny sleep with Elvis? Because Penny used to brag that she slept with Elvis Presley. So... Conversely, Moolah, she was proposed to by Hank Williams Sr. And, well, she turned down his proposal because he was a really bad alcoholic. But she never bragged. See, that's the difference. Penny Banner didn't have much class. Moolah was all class, 110%.
Perhaps it was a bit of jealousy on Penny Banner's part because she grew up being a massive fan of Hank Williams Sr. So perhaps there might have been a little jealousy over that one. Just presumptions on my part.
James, that's a great point. And one that I didn't realize that she was a Hank Williams fan. Didn't even think about that. That's a great point. You know, actually, I was talking with, speaking of fame and related to Moolah and everything, Jerry Lee Lewis's folks, and through them asking Jerry a series of questions about Moolah, and they were great friends. He had nothing bad to say about her and remembered her being at the shows and always hanging out at the shows and being friends. And Elvis, of course, was around at that time. Moolah knew Elvis, you know, as well.
Yeah, so did Mae. Mae told me. She said, oh, he'd come to all the shows to see us girls.
And if Moolah had anything to do with any of these men, though, to your point, Carmine, she was a Southern belle. She was all lady. She had her nails fixed, her hair done, made up all the time, sweet as could be. But don't cross her.
No, don't do that.
But you shouldn't do that anyway, to anybody, right?
Correct. She was classy, and she definitely taught her students, taught these girls how to act like women, how to dress like women. She didn't want any of the girls drinking, especially in public, and she didn't either. I remember asking her one time in Vegas, I said, Lillian, can I buy you a drink? And she said, oh, darling, you know I only drink ginger ale. But I did hear on the kayfabe that her and Mae did like to throw down a few.
Yes, but she enjoyed cocktails earlier on in her life. But for medical reasons and medication that she was taking, I believe she had to stop drinking. I'm not saying that she drank to excess every day. I'm just saying like she couldn't really drink like she might have back in the day. Because as we get older, I guess people get on those certain medications and you just can't do it.
Right, you can't mix them.
She liked those gin and tonics too, pretty good.
I ran into her and May on an elevator in Vegas at like 4:00 in the morning. And as I got on the elevator, they were the only two on there. And I stepped on, she like nudged May, like, straighten up, It was great. Oh, it was great. She empowered women, in my opinion. I mean, the first lady wrestler to perform at Madison Square Garden, her and Vicki Williams, 1972. Let's talk about that for a moment. Her as a role model.
That's right. I mean, let's take a look at what she came from, too. She had a mother that was gone. Her mother passed away when she was, I believe, 8 years old. And then she had her father and many brothers. I forget the exact number right now off the top of my head, but several brothers that raised her, and her dad took her to the wrestling matches. That's where she fell in love with it. The rest is history. But you take a look at that and the hard work and the determination that she got out of where she was at in life, being a very poor child, not having a mother. She made something of herself. That alone is saying something about a woman at that time period. We're talking about the 40s, 50s, 60s. That in and of itself was a major accomplishment. But she then got married, started training women, started, as you said, Carmine, empowering women. You bring up a good word when you say empowered, because she certainly did that with training women to get into the business, showing them a skill. And then you talk about opening doors in New York. Yes, she was the first one to Madison Square Garden in 1972. I mean, that's some big stuff. And she fought for that, not just for herself, but so that other women could wrestle. There's this narrative out there that Moolah controlled all the women all over the world. And while she controlled a lion's share of it, there were other women out there, like Beverly Shade, who have said that business did not affect their business. There was still a need out there for women's wrestlers. And Moolah was so empowering and so giving that even wrestlers like Beverly Shade, who didn't train or anything with Moolah would still give her bookings. And when I asked about the money, she said she called me with an offer and I accepted the money. I didn't know how much she was getting paid or anything like that, but I was the one that accepted the booking. So I agreed to the price. But my whole point is, yes, you're absolutely right. She was a major, major force in where we're at today, because I think, Carmine, without Moolah, women's wrestling might not have survived that time period.
I could not agree with you more, without a doubt. Every lady wrestler today should idolize Lillian Ellison, the Fabulous Moolah, for what she did for ladies wrestling. And folks today need to understand that these allegations against Moolah are completely false. 110%. Now look, she was very shrewd businesswoman. No doubt about it. The whole situation with Wendy, for example, is really a business dispute, because what went down was Wendy went behind Lillian's back and spoke to Vince about her money. And you don't do that.
Correct. That's a cardinal rule that was broken. Not only that, but ask for more money, ask to be paid in that Hulk Hogan pay rate. Let's look at it. I mean, Wendy was a great wrestler, a great women's superstar, and made some history of her own. I'm not going to take anything away from Wendy, but she broke two big rules there. She was only in the WWF a couple of years, and they put her in that spotlight. Moolah and Vince McMahon, they put her in that spotlight. And I believe that maybe somewhere in that, she lost focus on that. So business had to be done with the Spider Lady Screwjob.
Well, I love Wendy Richter. She's just a wonderful person. I spent a lot of time with her years ago on tour and did some indie shows with her. I really like Wendy a great deal. Let's talk about the match, which I find very entertaining.
Now, the story goes that that Wendy didn't know, and that Penny was in the back, and then at the very last second, she and Moolah switched costume and went out there and made sure that the women's championship was back, or at least off of Wendy for what she had done, for Vince McMahon. But Carmine, there's different variations of that story as we've seen throughout the years and heard throughout the years.
Well, Wendy claims that she had no idea that it was Moolah under the mask, which is very difficult to believe that she's having a match with somebody and she doesn't realize who it is, right? It's very difficult.
Can I stop you for just 1 second there and just say, how many matches do you think she and Lillian had with each other?
Right.
Before that, I just can't even believe the audacity of that comment that I didn't know who was under the hood. I mean, you know as well as I do from being in the ring. You would know instantaneously if you had been in the ring with somebody that much.
She didn't recognize Lillian's perfume? Come on.
Right. Come on. I mean, that was a signature smell, brother. It's still on the robes and gear that I have around here.
Also, Lillian, when I asked her about the match, she said, "Oh, Wendy had no idea it was me, and I just rolled her up." So Moolah also kayfabed it. You know, Wendy is very outspoken about Lillian, but when it comes to this match, she completely kayfabes it, still to this day. And Moolah did too. I find that very amusing.
You're right. Moolah did as well. I think it sounded more badass to Moolah that, I just went in there and kicked her ass. She didn't know who I was. But, I mean, obviously she knew who she was because you can go back and watch the match and there's stiff shots. And, I mean, I guess you would want to rip off the hood even if it wasn't Moolah, but she was adamant about doing that at the end of the match. You know, you can definitely see some stiff shots in that match. And at some point, you're talking to each other in the match.
And also, you're not taking a mask off of somebody unless they want you to take it off. That's
right.
One point. The other thing is that after the match, Wendy just gave her a working forearm after the match.
She sure did.
So it didn't seem like she was really pissed off. I mean, I've seen wrestlers pissed off, and they don't just continue working like that.
Right. That's right. Moolah held on to it, and she took it from her. She did not sell for her at all. At all.
No, not at all. Let's talk about what she did for these girls. What a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of these girls that came to Lillian were runaways. There were girls that were dependent on alcohol, drugs of all sorts. And I'm not saying all of them, definitely not all of them. But there was a good percentage of them that came to her basically broken and not with any type of future for them. And she empowered them. And she turned them into ladies, wouldn't you say?
You're absolutely right. That was a hallmark. I remember discussions with Moolah and just talking about it, and that was one of the themes that always came up. I'm sure you probably heard her say this too, but she would say, they show up in the sweatpants now and, sweatsuits now. Back in my day, we showed up, we had our nails done, hair, makeup, you act like a lady, you dress like a lady, you don't run around with the boys and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that was something that she instilled in all the girls. Like, if I know that just from having a relationship with her that was a few years, I know that the girls that trained with her, that was instilled. All of them that we talked to agree with that, Carmine. I mean, isn't that your experience with Lillian?
Definitely. I'm Sherry Martell. She told me how she would sneak out and go to the bar to have a couple beers and sneak back in. Yes. And how she had to sneak cigarettes, things like that. But she was very strict.
You had to be a lady with Moolah. There's another story, and I won't name names here, but she did not like them, to your point, to go out to the bars. Now, some of them worked at bars, but she did not like them to go out drinking and all that kind of stuff. So one of the girls was hungover and had been out partying and drinking Jack Daniels all night. Well, as it turns out, Moolah, of course, found out about it, and they practiced body slams for, I believe it was 3 hours that next day. And the girl that had been out partying all night was on the receiving end of all these body slams. She did not like that at all.
No. Hey, she did her best to keep the girls in line. So people talk about her being a shrewd businesswoman. And as I understand it, the deal was she took 25% off the top as a booking fee.
Right. But here's the reality of that situation. That A, is not an unheard of amount.
No, it's not.
And B, again, we're talking about 60s, 70s, 50s as well, with Moolah helping the business out as she did. If you went in her house, she had this office, and she had a picture of herself, several pictures and awards and all this on the wall, and then she had that phone there. And she'd be on that phone night and day. A lot of the girls have told me the reason she was making those connections for the girls and getting those bookings for the girls. Now, let's stop there for a second. Telephone isn't like it was. Nowadays, you pay maybe $150 or $200 for a cell phone, and you're good for the month. Back then, you know how the telephone bills were.
All those long-distance calls, right?
That's right. I mean, I I remember Selena Majors, Bambi, telling me she had a phone bill one time for $700 when she was taking bookings and, on the phone with promoters. Of course, you got to talk to them and work your dates, and that's all part of it. So imagine the astronomical phone bill associated with talking to all these promoters about getting the girls work. Not only did she show the girls a skill and give them a nice place to live, that's another thing that we'll talk about. A lot of this is, well, you had to live at Moolah's estate. You really didn't have to. For the most part, you really didn't have to, from what I understand. But where were you going to find a cottage that cheap? Lillian priced them low enough so that these girls could stay there.
I believe she charged $300 a month.
Right. I mean, that's nothing. Now, you can say, well, maybe that was something then, and maybe it was, but I think it's comparable to a lower price apartment. And it was there on the grounds. They didn't have to drive in every morning and all that kind of stuff. It was easy for them. But also it allowed Lillian to keep an eye on the girls, too. There's some funny stories about that, too, but all just humorous. The goal was to make them ladies, make them marketable. She didn't want them out with the boys because she didn't want them to get pregnant, and all that kind of stuff. And then, here we've got a girl trained up and invested all this time and energy into her. Now she's having a child. So the whole notion that she was pimping these girls out is just ridiculous on so many levels, but that's just one of them. She really tried to help these girls out, and you brought it up a while back. A lot of these girls came from broken backgrounds. Case in point, Diamond Lil. What do you think?
Right. How she discovered Diamond Lil and what she was smoking a cigarette. Diamond Lil said to Lillian, "I want you to be my mama." Lillian replied, "Well, no daughter of mine smokes cigarettes." From that point on, Diamond Lil never smoked another cigarette.
That's right. And Diamond Lil came from an abusive family, and that's why she ran away, to get away from that. I don't want to go into great detail there, but it just wasn't a good upbringing. Lillian gave her a place to live, a skill, and she set her up. She lived in that house, and then Johnny May took care of her until her dying. She left her place to Katie to live there as long as Katie's around. So, I mean, imagine the kind of life that Katie wouldn't have had she not met Lillian. That's just one example, because she didn't have to take her in, but Moolah said, we're going to work together. And she treated her like her daughter up until the day she died. And I know that Mary has said that she calls her her sister. And that's just how it was. It was a family-like atmosphere. And yes, she was a shrewd businesswoman, but I think that if you listened to her advice and respected her, I think that you got as far as you could go.
Absolutely. She looked out for the girls. She sheltered them. She fed them. She trained them. She gave them a community. She gave them identity. And Diamond Lil was like a daughter to her. And, of course, Moolah and May referred to Diamond Lil as their damn midget. Remember?
That's right. Yes.
She's my damn midget.
That's what we call Katie. She's a damn midget.
She's just a damn midget. And what is so sweet, and a lot of people might find bizarre, but Diamond Lil used to sleep at the foot of Moolah's bed.
That's right.
Lillian told me that in Vegas. And she sleeps right here, right at the foot of my bed.
Yeah. Well, Moolah wasn't that large of a lady anyway. She was a small, petite lady. So I could see where that would work out. But Katie loved Moolah. She was her mom.
That's right. She called her mom all the time. It was very, very endearing, very, very sweet. They had a great relationship. Let's talk about Moolah and her early days in the business. There's a great story that she used to tell about her and Buddy Rogers. Driving with Buddy Rogers, and I was going to be managing him, and we were in the car, and he put his hand on my knee and said, "If you want to be with the nature boy, you know what you got to do." And she said, "I know what I got to do. Pull this car over." And she hitchhiked to the nearest bus station, got on a bus to make the shot. I don't remember the city, and made the show. And she said, "I told the promoter I will not work with Buddy Rogers ever again." One of the biggest stars in the business.
That's right.
She wasn't taking no shit.
And to have the gumption to do that, there's another Moolah word for you. The gumption to do that at that particular time, being a woman in the business. Are you kidding me? She respected herself enough to do that, and she bet on herself that she could make it in the business without having to go about it the cheap way.
Exactly.
She believed in herself that much. Rewinding just a little bit, I wanted to say something that I forgot to mention, and that was, Carmine, I don't know if you've read this, maybe I've had the discussion with you, but Lou Thez, in his book, wrote that he wouldn't defend the world title on cards where women were wrestling.
I know.
And look, I'm not burying Lou. Not that it matters if I bury Lou anyway, right? But that was the sentiment of a majority of the male wrestlers at the time. So Moolah worked really hard to combat this. That's why she was on the phone nonstop for hours and hours and hours, because she got so many no's at the time. There was a lot of resistance to it that people don't understand or realize or even give credit to women like Moolah. And Moolah wasn't the only women's wrestler. That's not what I'm saying, but I just think that she played a big role in keeping that alive and keeping the girls working against all odds.
Yeah, without a doubt. I'm really happy you brought up Lou Thez. You know, May and Moolah used to just love to bust his balls. They loved it. So there's a story. I didn't witness it firsthand. This came from Lillian about how Lou used to say that nobody could get behind him. That used to be his saying, right?
Yeah.
So at a reunion, and May goes up to Lou, and as they're about to shake hands, she throws his arm up, goes behind him and tight waists him, and said, "I thought you said nobody could get behind you, Lou." And he got so pissed off. They loved to bust his balls. Here's something I'm going to reveal for the first time publicly. In 2000, I, at the time, was running my own wrestling shows in Milwaukee, Mid-American Wrestling, and May, who I knew, she just got this big push with WWE. So I got in touch with her to bring her in, and as we're talking, I said, "When did you start?" And she said, "Well, I broke in 1942. And I said, "Who's to say you didn't break in 1939? I mean, you could have been training. You could have had some exhibition matches. Who's to say that you didn't?" And Moolah loved it. She said, "Carmine, what a swerve. What are you saying?" I said, "Well, if we publicize that you started in 1939, that would mean that in January of 2000, you would have wrestled for 8 decades, which beats Lou Thesz's record." To this day, and you can look it up, there are various disputing accounts of when May started. And I'm happy to say, and very proud to say, that I propagated that swerve. And to this day, some places state that she started in 39. I remember the week that we put this out, added on his hotline that Mae Young is now starting her 8th decade in the business. So that's something that I'm very proud of, and May and Moolah just love me for that. What do you think about that, James?
I just want to read this real quick. On the WWE website, right now, on Mae Young's profile, go look it up if you doubt us. Johnny Mae Young began her professional career in 1939. She embarked on her chosen livelihood at the tender age of 15.
I love it.
Wow.
Look at that. They're both looking down on me right now, just laughing. Like Moolah's laugh, that you know, I can just hear her right now. I'm so proud of that. See, it's wrestling
history, Carmine. You changed history.
Thank you, Nigel. But, you know, you're truly, in my opinion, you've been such an unbelievable crusader for Moolah to clear her name. And how many ladies did you interview?
Well, I don't have the total in front of me right now. At the time, I interviewed about 27 women when we were going full swing with this thing a couple of years ago. But since then, I've been able to talk to a few others. So we're at a little over 30 women who have lent their voice to this. And then if you go back with the archival footage, like in the case of Luna, using her comments about Moolah exonerates Moolah of charges too. So if you add those type of women, or Sherry's interviews and things like that, it adds a few more.
These interviews exonerate Moolah from being a pimp.
From the charges, that's right. Like, for example, in the video, the shoot video with Luna and Gangrel said, "Moolah was a pimp, Moolah was a pimp." She just kind of rolls her eyes as if to be like, you know what I mean? Like, why is he interrupting what I'm trying to say? You know what I mean? Kind of annoyed, right, like you do with your spouse or whoever. And then she went on to explain that wasn't the case. Then she gave some timelines which would disagree with some of the things that have been said about her being underage and sent to take photographs with a photographer that she felt uncomfortable with. In that interview, she talks about timelines and when she went to Moolah's, and it doesn't add up that she was underage when she was at Lillian's. Stuff like that you can go back and look at. But then the interviews that we actually did, we asked the ladies about pay, about, you know, living there, about working with Moolah, with Beverly Shade. We even interviewed women like that who just worked around her and were in the business. And in an effort to understand all facets of how things worked and why they worked that way. We really set out to dig as much dirt as we could because we wanted to be fair. But it became very obvious to me that it was just a witch hunt, and Moolah was a victim of cancel culture.
Without a doubt. And the one that we can blame for all this, in my opinion, is Penny Banner.
Carmine, you're summoning up the spirits tonight, brother.
I had the opportunity to manage Moolah a few times, probably about a half a dozen times. First time I ever met her was in Hayward, California, 1989. I was told that I was managing Moolah that night. I didn't know Lillian at the time, and they told me that she was about to arrive in a limo. So I said, let's grab the camera, let's go outside. So when she got out of the limo, I introduced myself, and I got on one knee and kissed her hand. And ever since that moment, we had such a great friendship, and she just loved me, and I can't say enough about her as well. And she told me that I reminded her of Buddy Lee, because Buddy Lee was also Italian, and actually we had the same stature. Oh, you just remind me of Buddy Lee. In all fairness, Moolah was abused by Buddy Lee.
That's very true, and not only that, because Buddy Lee slept around, but going back to Sweet Georgia Brown, I don't know if you call it an affair that they had, but there was something going on there. I don't feel like it was a forced situation with Buddy Lee because Sweet Georgia Brown continued with Buddy Lee after Moolah and Buddy Lee split.
Right.
So I think there was something going on there perpetually. And as a sign of the times, it was just Buddy Lee had her in his stable, probably took care of her, that kind of thing, until eventually Buddy just moved on exclusively to music and went on to manage some of the biggest names in country music, including recently, even though this isn't a recent group, but the Dixie Chicks.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's true. Buddy Lee Entertainment was in Nashville, and actually is featured in one of Jeff Jarrett's vignettes from mid-'90s WWF.
Buddy Lee is a big name in Nashville, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Big name in the history of country music.
That's right. But Buddy Lee, as a human being, was very abusive, cheated on Moolah all the time, and eventually I think Moolah just had enough of it, and that was that. But there's so many accounts of him being a womanizer, and I believe that some of that got looped in unfairly with Lillian. Because, like I said, as soon as she found out, she hit the road. I believe that Rita Cortez is the one that broke everything open.
And at that point, that's when Lillian decided she was going to do this all on her own, and she was going to create her own agency for the girls.
Girl Wrestling Enterprises. Correct me if I'm wrong, but was that 1964?
I believe you're right, yes. 1964. I mean, this is unbelievable to think in 1964 that a woman to take this initiative, have so much confidence to go ahead and do what she did.
And to put it all into perspective, when were women allowed to vote in this country? Because we've been celebrating that. It was 1920. They're celebrating the 100th-year anniversary of that. When she took over this endeavor, women had less than 50 years been allowed to vote in this country. So think about that. Think about the impact of taking on that kind of operation. But she did it so well. She trained some great lady wrestlers through the years, Donna Christianello, Judy Martin, and several other women that we could go on and on. But those are two prime examples of ladies that were very helpful assistant trainers. Joyce Grable was another person that was very helpful to Moolah as a trainer there on Moolah Hill. So she built up other women at her camp. She gave them jobs as trainers and on the road wrestling, and really built a great stable of women that she was able to get out and keep women's wrestling alive. If she would have been just all about Moolah, she would have just focused on herself. And all that time that she spent building all this up for the other girls, she could have spent it on herself.
Absolutely. I like to bring up a story about Moolah and Joyce Grable and the night that they went to see Elvis in Las Vegas. Have you heard the story, Nigel?
I've heard the story, but Carmine, I'd love to hear it again. There's a picture that I've seen that's out there. You can see it if you're listening to this, of Moolah and Joyce Grable.
Right, with an ice bucket with a bottle of champagne in it. And the story behind the photo is that they went to go see Elvis. And Moolah said, oh, he wasn't so good. We didn't like him at all. Elvis was the shits. I'll never forget her saying that. You see, with Lillian, for some reason, I can recall verbatim so many of the things that she said to me. And that's one of them that I will never forget. Elvis was the shits. Joyce Grable and I, we got up, we grabbed that champagne, and we gave him the feather. And for years, I asked people, I said, what the heck did she mean by giving him the feather? Remember, I'm a Jersey boy, Nigel. I guess, well, she gave like a backhanded wave and walked out with the bottle of champagne. And then, well, guess who we went to go see then? We went to go see Frankie Lane. She loved Frankie Lane, by the way.
Yes. I do remember you telling me that story when we were in Vegas at the CAC.
Yeah.
And I popped so hard for that. I think Joyce, was she there with us when you told that story or recounted?
No, I don't believe
Moolah
so.
told you?
Actually, I did tell Joyce this story because I saw the photo was on her table in the memorabilia room, so I brought this story up to her. The classic tagline, Elvis was the shits.
Can we start a Moolah store on Pro Wrestling Tees? That could be one of the first shirts.
There you go. Elvis was the shits.
I think it would be great to open up a Fabulous Moolah Pro Wrestling Tees shop. There would be some people seriously interested in some of those shirts. But now I want to ask you about a certain event that took place at Madison Square Garden. Let's go back to February 18th, 1985. The War to Settle the Score. What did Moolah talk to you about that match with Leilani Kai and Wendy Richter?
Well, that was a really big deal. And you talk about that match being on that platform for women's wrestling was just a major milestone. But wasn't it somewhere around 8 million for that match? Maybe even more.
The ratings were off the chain for it, that's for sure. I believe the highest rated wrestling show on television for the time.
I think that's the highest rated women's wrestling match.
The War to Settle the Score did a 9.1 rating.
Wow. I don't know, but that could be the highest rated women's wrestling match of all time.
Right. Of course, Lillian did not wrestle on the event, but her influence is all over it, as Wendy and Leilani are her girls.
She trained both of them, brought them both up to the WWF, and put them in the spotlight. She
Right.
took a back seat doing the job for Wendy for the women's championship. She did that for Vince and for the business, and then the spotlight was put on, like you said, Leilani Kai and Wendy Richter, really giving these women an opportunity to make a name for themselves and to make a career. And certainly, when you're talking about the history of women's wrestling, those names come up repeatedly when you talk to people about women's wrestling from that era and just historical figures in the business. That was a big deal. You know, empowerment. We keep going back to that word, but Carmine, I think that you might have seen that in Snickers' statement that they wanted things that they were sponsoring to be empowering, and that's why they weren't going to stand by this and going to talk to WWE. And I think that if you look at what Moolah did, just in that moment, you'll see a lot of empowerment. Trained the women, put them in the spotlight, gave them all that knowledge. And I don't know everybody's background, so I'm not going to guess or anything like that because I'm not a biographer on all of these different ladies to the extent that I would know stuff about Moolah. But like you said, Carmine, you know, a lot of these women came from troubled backgrounds, and they would have no chance at such a life and such an opportunity that were given to them.
She did a lot for the girls. I mean, even to the point where she gave them vehicles to drive so they could make the shows and so on.
Loaned them money.
Moolah took care of her girls and looked out for them. What do you think Moolah would say today if she was alive?
About today's women's wrestling. Number one, she would love Charlotte Flair because
I agree.
She and Rick were good friends. Rick was even at her funeral. I think that she would like the way that it's going. I think that she would be very sad to know what has happened to her name because I strongly believe, going back to the Fez thing, going back to the being on the telephone all the time and the booking office, if it wasn't for what she was doing for the business at that time, it could have really been suffocated out of the business. I really strongly believe that. She kept it going. It's just amazing, really, if you go and look at what she came from and what she did, not only for herself, but for others, Carmine.
Nigel, thank you for all the work you've done in defending Lillian. I'm sure she's looking down on you and she's very, very proud. Thank you so much. I can't say enough for what you've done interviewing these girls. Folks can see those interviews on YouTube, correct?
That's right. You can go to the Nigel Sherrod YouTube, or you can simply go to the Fabulous Moolah or fightformoolah.com. Either one of those will get you to the links, and you'll be able to watch all that great stuff. It's very fascinating. We've got probably, I'd say close to 20 of the interviews up on YouTube.
Are the Fight for Moolah t-shirts still available?
There are still some Fight for Moolah t-shirts, and thank you, by the way, Carmine, for giving me this platform to talk about Moolah and your support of the Fight for Moolah campaign. Carmine actually bought one of our Fight for Moolah t-shirts that we had. We did it to, any of the profits went back into keeping the website open. We made such a small batch of them that that just paid for the shirts. Not trying to make a lot of money off of this thing, but we did license this shirt through Mary Austin, Moolah's daughter. So
Beautiful.
This was with the blessing of the Moolah family, with the understanding that any other profits would go to Mary and things like that. So that's what we do. It's available. It's got the design on it. If you want one, feel free to hit me up on social media, on Instagram, Nigel Sherrod, or you can hit me up on Facebook, same thing. I'm easy to find.
You know, in closing, regarding the Fabulous Moolah Memorial Battle Royal, who says that cannot be independently promoted? Why couldn't we book our own Fabulous Moolah Memorial Battle Royal? We don't rely upon any major corporate sponsorship. Why do you think that hasn't been done?
That was a big idea about 2 years ago with Women of Wrestling, that we were going to do that. But then the television contract that we had at that particular time with Access kind of prevented us from having two major events within that amount of time and needing the time to pull that kind of program off. So unfortunately, that wasn't done, but that was talked about, and we had even reached out to the family, and that was approved. But the cool thing is, Carmine, as long as we keep that memory alive of Moolah, the good thing is I have Moolah's boots, just a pair, but I have her robes and some of her ring gear. And I would certainly love one day to put that on display and show the world some of that great memorabilia, but also to have a great card dedicated to Moolah. You know, one day might be able to do that. I certainly would love to bring in some of the great female wrestlers that are available to come in and that are interested. I won't name names, but there's several women in the WWE now and AEW and Impact that agreed to do it, that were excited to do it, and several women that are still out there on the independent scene were excited about doing this. So I know that it's something that the women would like to do, that we reached out to, and I think that it would be great to honor. This is something that the WWE fails miserably while talking in their past that paved the road, like Judy Martin, Leilani Kai. The list goes on and on and on. Joyce Grable, in fact, even Wendy Richter. These women sacrificed a lot, and they are very much forgotten in the WWE history books, which I think is very sad. With that being said, doing a Fabulous Moolah Memorial Battle Royal would be more authentic outside of the WWE bubble anyway, don't you think?
I definitely agree with that. Let's get David McLean on this. Damn it. The guy is a genius. I love McLean. Such a smart guy. Let's do this.
Yes.
Come on, McLean. Let's get it together, and let's put together that Fabulous Moolah Memorial Battle Royal the way that it should be, the way that it should have been, and let's preserve the name of the Fabulous Moolah.
Absolutely. Oftentimes, wrestling fans and people in the wrestling business talk about having respect for our history. Without doubt, this woman did so much for the business. I think that it's about time that we stood up and kept that tradition going and honored her with such a great event. I think it would be great. I don't know. I might have to give David a call when I get off the phone, Carmine.
That's what I'm saying. You better. Nigel, what a pleasure having you on. Thank you for being so gracious with your time. I absolutely enjoyed this. Such a great deal. Ever since the beginning, when James and I decided to do a podcast, this was a topic that I wanted to undertake right away because I was very passionate about it. And I'm so happy that we were able to talk today. And thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you so much, Carmine, and thank you, James. I really appreciate you having me on. And again, thank you for the unwavering support. You even got one of those shirts and supported us that way, too. Thank you so much, because Moolah meant a lot to you. Moolah meant a lot to me. As you said it to me earlier, I think Moolah would be smiling down on you as well. On all three of us, bringing up her name and keeping her memory alive today. So thank you.
She's laughing right now. Thank you. Have a good one, Nigel.
Thank you.
We now have the pleasure of being joined here on Contrary to Popular Wrestling. You might know her from WCW. You might know her from the LPWA. You might know her from the original Women of Wrestling. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podcast, Bambi.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
The lovely Selena Majors. How are you, sweetheart?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Oh, just fantastic. I've enjoyed the time that we spent together in the business. We did an overseas tour together. We did some independent stuff, and you've just always been a sweetheart. And I was telling James, I said, I don't know if you know this, but Selena has looked the same for 30 years. Either you found the fountain of youth or you sold your soul to the devil.
I guess I'm just a little lucky, but thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. I think a lot of it has to do with I never changed my hairstyle for 30 years, so that helps a little bit.
I love it. We were talking to Nigel earlier about the fight for Moolah. You were directly involved with this as well, right?
Yes, I never went to Moolah school, but I grew up watching her. She was an icon, and as a kid, I just idolized her. And when we heard what was going on, I wanted to jump on the team and help defend what I felt was right. That's how I got involved in it, was with Nigel.
I mean, it's very unfair when people like us who knew Lillian, we know the truth. I mean, all of us would agree that she was very shrewd. She was at times maybe to some of the girls like dealing with a mob boss, like disrespect her, you're out of the picture. None of us would disagree with that, but to accuse her of pimping the girls is to accuse her of being a criminal. And I find that very, very offensive. And that's what really, really irked me about the whole thing, because we know that that's not true.
That's right. I've said before on a lot of different interviews and everything that I didn't really know her. I'd spoken to her a few times, but what I did know is I got into business and I was around all the girls that did go to her school. For 30 years, I knew all the girls, Leilani Kai, Wendy Richter, Peggy Lee, Joyce Grable. I mean, I could just go on and on naming the names, but never once did I hear anything like this. Like you just said, there was a few that didn't like her. I would say there was more that liked her that didn't like her, but that's going to happen in any business, any group of girls that you got going on. There's going to be a few that didn't like her. She was very businesslike, but she helped those girls. The one thing, the most important thing is whether you like a person or don't like a person, you can't just make up big lies and tell about them. The two things that I heard that was completely false was drugging the girl. She hated any kind of drugs, didn't allow any drugs in the Moolah school or anything like that, and the pimping, which was basically, I think where that came from was some of the girls use that terminology, and they still do. A friend of mine, Malaya Hosaka, she was on Facebook a few weeks ago and joked and said, I guess I'll have to start prostituting myself out for bookings. Now, we all know that she doesn't mean that literally, it's just a phrase, and I think over the years, the fans and some of the marks out there took that word and ran with it. It's very unfortunate.
This all came to light how many years ago? For the Battle Royal?
Yeah, about 3 years ago or 2 years ago, something like that.
Now, originally, I heard of the story back in 2000, and I spoke to Lillian and May about it. Did you hear this shit that Penny Banner's saying? Penny was probably Moolah's #1 arch enemy, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
A lot of jealousy there. A tremendous amount of jealousy there between those two. I made the comparison earlier in the show, but I'm going to make it again. Hell with it. How Penny Banner used to brag to people how she slept with Elvis. You heard that, haven't you?
Yeah.
Now, Moolah obviously slept with Hank Williams Sr., but she didn't brag about it. The only thing Moolah alludes to is that Hank Sr. proposed to her and she turned him down because he drank too much.
Correct.
So there you go. Apparently, what we've learned, my very crafty co-host found out that Penny was a huge fan, a huge mark for Hank Sr. So maybe that's where the jealousy comes from. How about that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because most of the girls that's come out with whatever they're saying about Moolah, a lot of them, I feel like it was a lot of jealousy. And on a few of the cases, I think that there was issues with a particular girl involved, but, most of it just comes from jealousy. And I didn't really understand that she was actually helping all the girls. I mean, if she wouldn't have been able to bring them in, teach them a skill, give them work, help them get their money, help them get booked, I mean, they wouldn't have had a career and they wouldn't have been in this business. And they don't look at it that way.
There's a certain percentage of the ladies that if they did not find Moolah, they may have ended up being a statistic, because a lot of them had problems that went to Moolah, and she helped them and helped them gain their self-esteem and empowered them and always wanted them to pride themselves on being a lady. She did so much for women, and I believe wholeheartedly that she needs to be respected as such, as the greatest lady wrestler that ever lived, because of how much of an impact that she had. she left Buddy Lee, when she broke up with Buddy Lee, when she just had enough of him abusing her, had enough of him screwing around, and she went off on her own as a young lady, broke away and started her own agency. She is really someone that needs to be respected and honored.
I agree. I'd like to add that I think that she did more for women's wrestling than any one woman that's ever been in this business. Because not only did she do it for herself, but she did it for many hundreds of girls that went through her school. Like you just said, they come from broken families, broken homes. They had nothing going for them, nothing in their favor. And she taught them a skill, gave them a place to live, kept them booked. And I will say one thing, the thing that they accused her of, pimping the girls out, she didn't do that. But I will say, if it wouldn't have been for her, a lot of the girls would have been sexually harassed by the guys in the business. And I can tell you that for a fact. If the girls wouldn't have had Moolah to protect them, I can tell you that for sure.
That is a phenomenal point there. You're right. She protected the girls. Because if any of the girls went back to Lillian, well, Lillian's going to take that right to the promoter.
Exactly. So, I've heard some stories of a few of the girls, and I'm not going to bring up names of the girls or the guys, but I've heard stories where the guys did, and all they had to do was tell Moolah, and Moolah would go to whoever was in charge of that territory, and that wouldn't happen again. And Moolah didn't like the girls going with the guys in the business, and she made a point to make sure that they didn't. She made them dress professionally. She did so much for women's wrestling that it's just unbelievable. I wish that everyone could be enlightened on all those things that she did. But the biggest thing is she protected the girls, and she was their passage to safety.
I want to say what a pleasure it's been having you on, Selena. I really mean that from the bottom of my heart. You're very passionate about this subject, just like I am. Moolah's reputation is very, very important, being how much of a pioneer she was, what she did for the business, what she did for ladies wrestling, what she did for women in general, being the first lady to wrestle at Madison Square Garden in 1972, breaking down all barriers, fighting with the State Athletic Commission. On her own, she decided to take up that cause and do it on her own, and she was determined to be the first woman to wrestle at the Garden. Things like that need to be admired. I wanted the folks here, wrestling fans, to know what the truth is. And thank you so much for being on, Selena. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for letting me be a part of it, because she was a great woman. She made so many sacrifices. It's a pleasure to come on the show and be able to tell anything that I can about it. Thank you so much for having me.
It is such a pleasure to have our next guest on. She's a great old friend of mine, one of the hardest working gals in pro wrestling, period. And if you saw her matches with Bambi, 9 times out of 10, that match stole the whole card. Please welcome the contrary to popular wrestling, my friend, Miss Peggy Lee.
Hello, fans out there and the people listening to this. It's nice to talk to my old friend. We went to Europe a few times together, and I tell you what, he always watched my back. He surely did.
Well, you and Bambi, you girls just put such a big impression on me. Today we're talking about Moolah and all the misconceptions about Moolah. And one thing that I have reiterated during our podcast has been that to accuse Moolah of being a pimp would infer that she was a criminal. And you know, that really doesn't sit well with me. With that, you're implying that the girls were prostitutes. And that's absolutely not the case whatsoever.
No, I tell you, Carmine, that's not the case at all. I went to see my sister, rest in peace, went on a little hard. I love her with all my heart. I miss her too. She come down through here because I was working in a factory. She come here. She had a wrestling match with Moolah down in Savannah. Well, I didn't know too much about it, you know. I mean, I was just a young thing, like 19 years old. And she goes, well, go with me. She didn't really like to drive, so I love to drive. I just started truck driving for a while there in my later years. But anyway, I went down there with her, and I was watching the match, and I didn't know nothing about the wrestling thing. And she kept gouging Winonah's eyes and throwing out the ring. I was so mad. I was about the second row. I was so mad. About the third time she done it, I went up and jumped on the ring, and I was 1 foot through the ropes, and these cops grabbed me, and they took back when you had the big belts and all that. They each one grabbed me by the loop, took me outside and threw me out. out, and when I went out, I fell on the ground, and it was raining like crazy. So I went around to the back, I knocked on the door. When he answered, I said, "You think I can come in here?" And I went in there, and, that's my first taste of, like, as far as live matches. I always kind of liked it. I watched Bob Orton Jr., Ox Baker and all, but after that, I thought, She said, "Won't you go back up to South Carolina with me and just put you on a Greyhound back?" I thought, well, that'd be nice, get away a little bit. I took off my job. I went over there, and I seen Moolah. And she was in a small trailer. She had all them little places for rent, and she was throwing a bed at it. And when he said, "Lillian, I'd like for you to meet my sister, Peggy," she goes, "That's the one that come through the ropes, and I think she'd make a good wrestler." And I told Winnie, I said, "Winnie, if that's your friend, I don't need no friends." So I left. I left for a whole year that I kept contemplating. And then I went back up there about a year later. And Moolah is all this about her talking about, she tried to pimp me off and all. I was there for 5 years. And I wrestled at Shea Stadium with Moolah. It was me and Candy Malloy, Beverly Shade and her, which I was so nervous it was pathetic. But all over New York, just several places. Went to Belize with her. And not one time did she try to pimp me out. And it pisses me off. When you said that Moolah was a pimp, that implies that I was a prostitute or got pimped out. And I'll tell you what, she never one time come up to me and said something about any kind of go out with this person. And my sister Winnie, she passed away Mother's Day, and I talked to her about it. She goes, "No, she never did that." Candy Malloy, which passed away not long ago, she was a good friend of mine. We went to Venezuela and all these places together, El Salvador. She never done her. So these girls that are saying that, I don't know what the heck their problem is. That I'm not trying to blow my own horn, but I'm not a bad-looking woman. Why would she try to pimp me out? Because I'm sure there would have been someone out there. So no, Moolah was not a pimp. And I heard this lady Maxine wrote a book. Have you heard about it, Carmine?
I did. I guess everything is done like in a fictional way. Like she doesn't actually mention names, I guess.
She don't? Well, see,
no.
I hadn't read it, but someone replied that she said the same thing about Moolah was a pimp. I know Lady Max. I wrestled with her all down there in Florida. I portrayed myself as Peggy Lee Pringle, Percy Pringle's sister, blah, blah, you know how it goes.
Right.
But I heard that she implied that. They kind of upset about that.
I mean,
because she didn't.
Right. She didn't at all. You were there for how many years around her?
That's what I was thinking about. Here I am. I was in the bid. I went there for 5 years, and I just went out on my own. And Lady Max, she was at Moolah's now. It wasn't in the year that she went down to Florida, independent and all that, and got in with the crowd down there, the Pringles and all that, the Grahams. But she wasn't there long, so she don't know Moolah from the outside haircut. Right. She don't know her. Moolah liked her because she had that pink mohawk and was different.
And she had size. She was tall, yeah.
Yes, because she was an eye catcher, but she couldn't wrestle. And Lady Max, if you hear this, I'm sorry, but I wrestle a lot lower than you have. And I had to carry her and Luna because Luna had just started that time. And I had to carry both of them because they didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Back to Lillian and the accusations of her being a pimp. Now, a lot of things were said about Lillian throughout her career. A lot of people said it to her face. She was very shrewd, and, there's no denying that. People had differences in business dealings with her. Some people didn't agree with how much money that she took off the top of a booking, which was like 25%, right?
Correct.
That sounds pretty reasonable.
Well, the way I look at it is Buddy Lee, he was doing all the wrestling and stuff, and she got involved in it. A slave girl. She told me some stories about that. It was kind of cool. I'm just saying what she told me. She come in when I caught him there in South Carolina with, another girl. So she made him leave. But Moolah, she had her hands into the pile, so to speak, right?
Right.
So you don't give her 25% of what you make. Well, how the hell are you going to get booked, right? At that time, nobody knew that. I made Mildred Burke, but I don't know where she was from. But Moolah was on this coast, the East Coast. So she knew all the promoters because she used to go around with Buddy Lee. And I think that the fact that she done all the booking and all that, 25% was fair. But what upset a lot of girls, and it upset me too, and that's why I actually left after 5 years. I used to rent her condo out over there. Winona and I did. And actually, Joyce Grable one time was my roommate. And so anyway, she knew the ropes. But after a while, it was like 25%. But I understand why she did that, because she got to make a dollar. She loved wrestling, and she knew all the ropes.
Well, yeah, and she's taking 25% out of your payday from working the garden.
She makes
That's
all the
still a tremendous payday. payday, right? I mean, still a tremendous payday, right, Peg?
Right.
I mean, to
and
work.
She would make the phone calls. But what I didn't like in the other girls is because she would not show us the check. She just say you made this and this and this. And after a while, I said, well, Moolah, I'd like to see the checks. Like when they come in from Vince McMahon Sr., because I wrestled Madison Square Garden. The first time I wrestled there was Senior, and it was me and Wendy Richter and Velvet and Princess Victoria. We never seen the checks, so she gave us what she wanted. But after a while, when I started getting pretty good in this thing, I thought, well, I'd like to see my check, and so did Wendy and Joy. A bunch of us did. That was like the demise of it, because I'm sure she did. She'd get the check, cash, and give us what she wanted to give us. You smell me?
That's her shrewdness. If you look up shrewd in the dictionary, you might have Lillian.
And have her picture under it. It would have her picture right under it. One thing Moolah told me one time, I'll never forget, was me, Moolah, Vivian St. John, and Candy Malloy. We all went up to New York and Philadelphia and all that. And she had this nice van, and everybody was asleep and all that. I said, well, I'll drive. So I got up there. Everybody was asleep. Her boyfriend at the time was back there, and we were going down through there. And she goes, I think you need to be a bad girl. I said, Moolah, I don't know about that. I said, I like people. You know me. I'm a people liker.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
She goes, but you look like you'd make a good hill to me. And that's when I dyed my hair red. I don't know if you know all that, because she taught me into it. She goes, you got to look different from the people in the audience. And I thought, okay, so I did. And I kept the hair red for like 5 years. And she goes, and Peggy Lee, no matter what you choose to do in life, be the best that you can at it. And I'm not saying I was the greatest wrestler, but I put my 101% into every match I had.
Like I said before, I have seen you and Bambi on so many cards and steal the whole damn show.
And that was because of Moolah. I'll never forget that. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning, still had 2 or 3 hours ago, and she told me that, and I thought, so, and I did. I just took that to heart.
Yeah, that's exactly the whole point of the podcast here, and just to clear that up, because that is such a misconception, and that people try to be funny about it and everything, but it's absolutely not true. We wanted to clear the air of it. The first I ever heard about it was like in 2000, and I remember speaking to Lillian about this, and May. They said that it was Penny Banner that was spreading those rumors.
I was going to ask you, how did it get started? Because I've never heard nothing about it till the sneakers promotion pulled out the woman's battle royal. That's the first time I heard of it.
When I first heard of these accusations of her pimping the girls out, that was back in 2000, and they said that it came from that dang Penny Banner starting shit again. That's what that is, because I've heard before folks say, well, Moolah didn't have the opportunity to defend herself, that all this stuff came out after her death, which actually is not true. Lillian was very well aware of this stuff, and she knew where it came from.
What did she say to you about it? She probably just went, oh, hun. No, listen to them jackasses, hun.
Well,
that was her favorite thing. Hey, hun, you doing all right, hun?
And her laugh, and you can't forget her laugh.
No.
If anything, she did laugh like a witch, if anything, but she used to laugh at that all the time, too.
She was probably saying, they can all kiss my ass.
Yeah, she doesn't. This is going to be the third time on this podcast that I'm going to say this, but when I brought this up to May and Moolah in a hotel room in 2000, and I said, this stuff's going on, and well, that's just that Penny Banner. And May said, right out, she said, Peggy is nothing but a whore. And Lillian said, oh, she's no whore. She's too stupid to be a whore. She gives it away for free.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that's Moolah. That's Moolah. Sounds just like her.
And I'll never forget it. Moolah was just a blast to be around. She was just great. Oh. Right? I mean, she was so funny. And she'd come up with some stuff that just crack you up sometimes,
At Christmas, we'd go down there. She had in her zebra room. Have you ever been to her house?
You know what? I regret. She invited me a couple times, and I never did go, unfortunately.
Well, she had a really nice place there. You walk in, right when you walk through her, it's like, forte, then you go into it's like a kitchen and all that. She had a big picture of Hank Williams up there. She dated him. him.
Right,
Did you know
right.
that?
Yeah, I did know that.
Well, she dated him. She had a huge picture of him. And then one Christmas, she's got this, it was called the zebra room. You walk down this little hallway and then beautiful rooms, zebra rugs and all that. We was opening the gifts, and then Katie came out. She goes, "Is this coming in the mail?" It was me and Joyce Grave. I mean, just all of us, right? She had nice sandwiches and just drinks and all that. And she opened it up, and it was from Hank Williams Jr. And it was a nice gold necklace with a guitar, and it was from Hank Williams Jr. I thought, wow.
Wow.
And then when I actually went with her, and me and Candy Malone went with her in South Carolina one night to see Hank Williams live, and I was drinking me some beer, of course. You know how I like to drink my cold beer sometimes. I was having a ball, and I was going to meet him, and then I forgot what had. Something happened, and there was so many people out there, and I said, honey, I ain't going to sit here and wait all night. Like I said, you go into her, right there at the back door, it's a huge picture of Hank, white suit with the hat on and a guitar, beautiful picture. And for some reason, old Hank Jr. took to her because he sent her that beautiful gold necklace with a gold guitar on it. She showed all of us the thing that said, to Lillian Ellison, love you always, Hank. I thought, wow.
Wow.
I wish I'd took a picture of that. That's something.
I don't think Penny Banner got anything from Elvis after she slept with him.
Oh, did she?
Well, that's what she used to claim.
So, Peggy, you mentioned earlier that you had a story about Moolah during her early days as a valet working as slave girl Moolah. Would you mind sharing that for us?
Moolah and I had a booking somewhere, South Carolina, somewhere around there, and that was one of my first matches. You know, I was just, of course, scared to death, but we stopped at a Waffle House. It was late one night. We went in and we were eating. She goes, when I was the slave girl, said I made about $15 a match, and I would go into a place and I would be so hungry. You know, not really no money after the gas. I'd be so hungry, I'd go in there and I'd get me some crackers and just sit there and order me a little cup of coffee. And I would take the crackers and I would just squish them up and put ketchup on them and a little of that coffee just to make them like soggy. And she said, I've done that for a while. So she definitely loved pro wrestling. And I just thought, wow, that's something there. I mean, she loved it so much that she would go and wrestle. And, well, she was a manager then, the slave girl, but she'd do it for $15 little. And that's something.
Yeah, it really is. It just goes to show how much she did. She cared about wrestling, and she cared about making it better, even in later years when she started training. What was it like training at Camp Moolah?
Well, when I first got there, you know, I paid her, but it was $500 when I got there. And the fact that Winona was there, my sister, she was letting me make payments. So I got me a 12-speed bicycle. I was only 19 years old, and I worked in this little place, nursery. It wasn't that far, about 2 miles, but I'd go there, but I'd go train. I'd go before I went there about 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd lift the weights, and then I'd train for a couple hours, and then I'd go to work, and then I'd come back, and I would train from like 5 to 7. So I was training like 4 hours a day. She let me pay her a little here, a little there, but the fact that, you know, my sister backed me up and Joyce, but back then it was $500. I'm not sure what the girls were paying after that. But she put me through some extensive training. I'm talking about, she got mad at me one time because I went to a Rod Stewart concert and I missed the training. Well, we had some new girls coming in, and she was teaching them how to body slam people on me. Now, ain't that something? They were dropping me on my head and my shoulders, and I'll tell you what, the next day I was so sore I had to reach back and grab my hair just to sit up. I was so doggone sore. But it was extensive training, and I never had, I mean, my mic skills were so, not like some of them, you know, like Joyce Grable and Judy Martin and all those. They had great mic skills, but I just wouldn't, I guess I was always a little shy. But her training was gruel, and if you didn't make it, she'd make you pay for it. One way or the other, that's for sure. But I learned a lot from Joyce and Judy. They'd get out there with me, and Moolah, and my sister, of course, she wanted me to do better, and Vivian St. John, she helped me a lot, and Wendy Richter, I went to Japan with her. The second time I went there 14 times. I guess they liked me. But I got my doggone ankle broke over there. They were going to send me back, and Wendy said, I'm not going to stay over here by myself. So I was there for 6 6 weeks, just Wendy and I. You know, they paid me half the money, but that's better than coming home and just sitting around with a broke ankle.
That really was nice of them.
It was very extensive. You had to be there, and it was rough.
But I think you'd agree that even though she was rough on some of the girls, but that's kind of what you needed to make it in this business. It's not a business for people that can't take stuff like that.
You cannot be a pansy and come into wrestling, because when I jumped in the ring that day, she was beating up Winona and Savannah. I was mad. I was playing softball at that time. I was all like strong and physical, and I was going to whoop her ass, but the cops grabbed me before I got in there. And she said, that girl makes a good wrestler. A year later, bam, here I am. I said, all right, let's do it. I wrestled for 35 years, and I mean, I had a long stint with it, and I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed traveling and meeting all the people I've met in my life and just being out there. I really enjoyed it.
It's how I was able to meet you, Peggy.
Yeah.
Right. And being on tour and being overseas. We were overseas a few times on those overseas tours with Bob Urey and Ted Petty.
Yes, we had a great time.
Spain together.
I wish I'd have took more pictures, because that's the most beautiful place. Austria, Vienna, all them places, it was just beautiful. I should have got me one of them little cans about this. They were so heavy, you had to tote them right on the shoulder.
I'm going to send you some photos.
Yeah, send me some photos, Carmine. I would really like that.
I definitely will.
And I'm glad that you called me, because, like I said, I would go to my grave note that she was not a pimp. As she was, I'd never seen any inkling, and I know a lot of them girls, and not one of them's ever come up to me and said anything. So Penny Banner just really got a bad rumor started.
Yep, that's where it came from. That's my understanding anyway.
I hate that.
Peggy, thank you so much. It would not have been the same podcast without you. I adore you. I can't wait to see you. It's been a while, but hopefully we'll get together soon.
I hope so, Carmine. I love you, babe.
Be good.
You too.
And next, we're being joined by a lady who was definitely one of the closest people in Lillian Ellison's life, in the life of the Fabulous Moolah. We're being joined now by Miss Katie Glass, otherwise known as Diamond Lil. Ma'am, welcome to our podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
Well, I know you don't do a lot of podcasts. I know that for a fact. So
because I don't talk that much.
I'm just tickled pink to have you on, and I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Let's start right from the beginning of when you met Lillian.
I met her in Richmond, Virginia when I went to a wrestling match. She was there. Somehow she saw me in the audience. She come over there to talk to me. I was scared to death. I hadn't been around wrestling like that. Anyway, she come over and talked to me and everything. How would I like to come to her school? I said, I don't know. I hadn't even thought about nothing like that. She gave me her phone number and her address. If you change your mind, give me a call and I'll meet you. That's how that happened.
That's how you first met her. And then there's a story about when you did come to the school. I believe you were smoking cigarettes. Is that right?
Yeah. I think that's what stopped my growth, so I don't know. So I was just teasing. Yeah.
I love that.
I got a kick out of that, huh?
You felt right then and there, she felt like she was your mom.
Yeah, that's true. I quit smoking,
Right from the get-go.
Got rid of cigarettes and everything, yeah.
She said, no daughter of mine smokes cigarettes, right?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right.
Who trained you at first, Katie? Who got you in the ring and actually trained you?
Moolah did.
Oh, she did herself.
Yeah.
How long did you train with her?
Oh, I don't know. Good Lord. But it was a while, and everything. But she trained me.
Did you find it tough? Was it difficult?
Yeah, well, sometimes it was difficult, everything, but you do all right with it.
You really wanted it. You wanted to do this.
Yeah, I sure did.
You were determined. You are another lady that has, in my opinion, empowered women. I mean, with everything that you faced in your life and so on, and you persevered. You were an unbelievable attraction in the day. As Moolah always said, all the girls. I mean, who did Moolah produce that didn't make money? That wasn't an attraction.
No.
Right? I mean, everybody. She did a great job with everybody that she trained.
She always said I was her damn midget.
I'm so happy that you brought that up.
That's my damn midget.
That's my damn midget, she used to say. Yeah, I heard that.
I know. She used to say that, yeah.
I heard that so many times.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And you lived with her for many years.
Yeah, many years.
With May. Who else lived in the house?
Yeah.
Was it just you three to live in the house? You, May, and Lil?
Yeah.
I think her brother came to stay with her for a while, right?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Mm-hmm. Over the little house behind the big house, yeah.
She was a generous woman, and that's what a lot of people don't really understand. I mean, she was frugal.
A lot of people don't like her.
Well, jealousy, wouldn't you say,
Yeah,
Kate?
jealousy, that's what it is.
It's all jealousy.
But I like her. I thought she was a great, great mother to me, so.
She was generous to a lot of people. She was generous to you. One reason why I am so passionate about doing this particular podcast is because I've heard so many things about Lillian that are just not true. And the one
No,
thing...
it ain't true. It's not true.
I know that. You know that. There's so many of us that do know, but then there's so many other people that you're just so difficult to sway them, to get them to understand that they have a complete misconception of who Lillian Ellison was.
Yeah, that's true, too.
What are your fondest memories of being with Lillian?
I've been around her a long, long time. She was like a mother to me. She took care of me.
I want to thank you for being on, because I know...
Well, thank you for having me on. I hope everybody's listening to this thing, and y'all have a blessed, blessed day.
Thank you very much, Miss Katie. You have a wonderful evening.
We want to give a huge thank you to Diamond Lil, Peggy Lee Leather, Bambi, and Nigel Sherrod for joining us. Carmine, it was a great little project for us to undertake to defend the Fabulous Moolah's name and get the fabulous truth out there. Carmine, what did you think about this show? Do you think we did a good job exonerating Moolah?
Well, I certainly hope that we did. We certainly tried to clear up any of those misconceptions that people may have had of Lillian Ellison. So many different rumors that have gone around through the years about Moolah, but people need to understand that she was loved, and loved by a lot of people. And even the ladies who had business disagreements with her, a damn good percentage of them actually had business disagreements with her. They also came out and said that these accusations about Moolah being a pimp or anything of that nature is completely ludicrous and absurd. I hope that this helps in an effort for people to stop referring to Moolah as such, because she wasn't. She did a lot for a lot of people, and regardless of what any wrestling nerds think, she did a lot, if not the most, more than anybody has ever done for ladies wrestling.
Indeed, she did. There is no doubt that she is an absolute icon in this business in general, not just in women's wrestling. But we want to thank you, the fans, for listening to Contrary to Popular Wrestling and hearing the fabulous truth about Moolah. You can find out what we're doing on our next show on our Facebook page, Contrary to Popular Wrestling, with Carmine DeSpirito and James Southard. Go over, give us a like, stay up to date with the shows, interact with us. You can also send us an email at contrarypod@gmail.com, contrarypod@gmail.com. Send in your questions, comments, concerns, or corrections. Let us know. We want to hear from you, and we will see you all next week on Contrary to Popular Wrestling.